Welcome to Rugby Borough Council's Planning Committee this evening, Wednesday, the 11th of February. I'm Councillor Neil Sanderson, Chair of the committee. This meeting is being web streamed to the public through the Council's YouTube channel. During the meeting, when asked to speak, please use the push button to talk to the microphone in front of you. This will allow the camera to pan in your direction and everyone will hear you. Before we begin the formal agenda, I am obliged to read out the following fire notice. There is no fire drill scheduled in the building this evening. If the fire alarm sounds, then please could I ask you to make your way out of the building and down the main staircase and out of the main doors of the town hall and congregate at the entrance of Caldecott Park. An officer of the council will give instructions on when it is safe to return to the building. Do we have any apologies? Oh, minutes of the last meeting. Are members happy that that's a reasonably true and accurate record? Thank you. I just signed the minutes. Receive apologies of absence from the meeting.
Thank you, Chair. Tonight we have apologies from Councillor Russell, with Councillor Garcia here as substitute. We also have apologies from Councillors Picker and Gillius.
Okay, we did declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest under A? Councillor Garcia.
Because I'm the ward councillor for the Revel and Binley Woods, and although this doesn't come into Binley Woods, it is adjacent to it, so I just wanted to make that clear. Thank you.
Councillor Garcia. Are there any other declarations of interest under B? Right. Any interest under C? Non-payment community charge or council tax? No, everyone's paid. Thank you. Is of site visits. Do applications first. Oh, the applications. Right, we have application R240716 for nursery, Rugby Road, Brandon. And can I hand over to Lucy to...
Thank you, Chair. This application has been called to the committee this evening by Councillor Timms in regards to the impact on Greenbelt and visual amenity. This is an outline application for up to 43 dwellings with associated public open space. All matters are to be reserved except for the access point into the site. Access is to be provided at the north of the site in a similar position to the previous garden centre. Reference is also made in the proposal to additional pedestrian and cycle access being made to Rugby Road at the centre and south of the site. The southern pedestrian and cycle access will be opposite Speedway Lane, which is a public footpath. The design and access statement refers to providing large areas of open space and landscaping to the site, and these will connect the footpaths to the north and the site to woodlands, and an informal path network to the south and west. The application relates to the site of a former garden centre and nursery location in the Greenbelt between the villages of Brandon and Binley Woods. Although the site is located closer to Binley Woods, it is within Brandon Parish. The site previously included buildings associated with the garden centre in the northern part of the site, and these included a bungalow, glass houses and other buildings. These buildings were removed between 2018 and 2020. And whilst foundations and areas of hard standing remain, scrub vegetation vegetation has established across the site. The application site includes the area of former buildings and an adjacent area to the southeast, which was previously used for horticultural purposes. Former reservoirs are included at the southern end of the site. The access to the site is to be located at the north of the site, and the site is relatively flat with a slight slope down towards the existing reservoirs. The boundary to Rugby Road comprises a low-level hedge and elements of fencing, and there are trees within this boundary and across the overall site, including mature trees to site boundaries. There are detached properties within large gardens to the west of the site boundary within Binley Woods, and There are detached properties within large gardens to the west of the site boundary with Binley Woods and the primary school beyond this. To the other side of the school, properties front Rugby Road. These are a range of dwelling types and styles and are predominantly two-storey houses and bungalows. The site is opposite a road of dwellings on the north side of Rugby Road, and these also comprise a mix of detached and semi-detached bungalows. Brandon Stadium, which is currently vacant, is to the rear of these houses and in parts fronts Rugby Road. Speedway Lane is to the south of the stadium site and opposite this site. This is a narrow lane leading to a range of homes. This is also a public footpath which leads to a range of other public footpaths which form links to the wider area, Coombe Abbey and Brinklow. And this includes a public footpath at Gossett Lane to the northwest of the site entrance. And we then have some additional site photographs across the site, including the access and within the site and looking out towards the properties on Rugby Road. There has been an illustrative master plan submitted with the application, and this shows the retention of the hedgerow and the provision of a landscape buffer to the Rugby Road frontage. Existing vegetation to the site boundaries and close to the reservoirs will be retained. Public open space is proposed in the centre of the site between the proposed dwellings and the existing reservoirs. A detention basin is proposed within this area with drainage swales adjacent to the northwestern boundary. As this is an outline application, details of the design of the properties are not known at this stage. However, parameter plans within the design and access statement set out how the site is to be developed, and these show a maximum building height of 2 stories up to 10 metres. The proposed density is up to 30 dwellings per hectare on the majority of the site and up to 25 per hectare on the southern part of the site. Landmark buildings are proposed where vistas, entrance gateways and traditional nodal spaces occur, and these will be distinguished by their architectural design or materials. In assessing the key issues in relation to the site, I'll go through the matters included on this slide. Moving first to the assessment of the strategic planning policies. The development plan when assessing this application is the Rugby Borough Council local plan and the Brandon and Brentford neighbourhood development plan. The site is located in the Greenbelt as per policy GP2 of the local plan, and the NPPF states that development will only be permitted if allowed by national policy. Policy DS1 of the Rugby local plan is considered out of date, and the council cannot demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply. Therefore, the tilted balance is triggered and an assessment is required as to the scheme's compliance against Section 13 of the NPPF and whether any harm identified provides a strong reason for refusing the development. Therefore, with the council not being able to demonstrate the 5-year housing land supply, the presumption in favour of sustainable development and the tilted balance applies to this proposal. Therefore, it shouldn't be granted unless the application of policies in the NPPF state that protected assets of particular importance provides a strong reason for refusal, or the adverse impacts of granting planning permission would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits, having particular regard to the key policies of the NPPF for directing development to sustainable locations. The NPPF states that the fundamental aim of the Greenbelt policy is to prevent urban sprawl by keeping land permanently open, and the essential characteristics of Greenbelts are their openness and their permanence. Paragraph 144 outlines the 5 purposes served of the Greenbelt. And it continues in paragraph 154, which outlines when new buildings would not be regarded as inappropriate. It's considered that this application would not accord with paragraph 154G, as the proposal includes undeveloped areas of the site. However, in 2014, the NPPF introduced greyback land, and therefore we need to carry out an assessment of this proposal against each of these three purposes as outlined on the slide. When considering purpose A, the application site is located to the east of Binley Woods, but it is not directly adjacent to the settlement boundary. Binley Woods is a main rural settlement located to the east of Coventry. However, Binley Woods is separated from Coventry by the A46 and open areas of land, including woodland and sports pitches. It's therefore considered that Binley Woods does not form part of the large built-up area associated with Coventry. The application site does not therefore contribute towards checking the unrestricted sprawl of a large built-up area. Moving to purpose B, the guidance is clear that this criterion refers to towns, not villages. The site is located between the villages of Binley Woods and Brandon. This criterion is relevant to the towns of Rugby and Coventry, and therefore due to the location of the site and the existing areas of separation, it is not considered that the site contributes to this purpose. Considering purpose D, the closest towns to the site are Rugby and Coventry, and whilst these contain historic features, given the distance from the site, it is not considered that the site contributes to its purpose. As part of the evidence base for the emerging local plan, a Greenbelt contribution study was produced, and this assessed all Greenbelt land within the Borough in relation to its contribution to Greenbelt purposes and identification as Greybelt. This identified the majority of the application site as making a moderate contribution to purpose A, with the southeastern portion making a strong contribution and the site making a weak contribution to purpose B and a weak contribution to purpose D. This report identified that the site is potentially not suitable for designation as Greybelt. However, the officer report and assessment of this application considered all land within the Borough from a high-level strategic perspective, and the assessment, as just outlined and contained in the officer report, considered the site in more detail and considers that it does not strongly contribute to these purposes, and it is therefore considered the site comprises Greybelt land. Once it is established that the site is considered Greybelt land, under paragraph 55 we still need to consider the additional criterion. It's considered that the site is Greybelt and does not contribute towards purposes A, B or D of paragraph 143. However, it is considered that the application site does contribute towards purpose C to safeguard the countryside from encroachment. However, given the relatively small size of the site, the number of dwellings proposed and the proposed two-storey building heights and large areas of open space, it's not considered that this impact would fundamentally undermine the purposes of the Greenbelt. And in relation to purpose E, the fifth purpose included to assist urban regeneration, it is unlikely that the development of this site would prevent the development of other suitable sites within the urban area. Therefore, the proposals would not fundamentally undermine the purposes when taken together of the remaining Greenbelt across the area of the plan, and the proposal therefore does satisfy the requirements of NPPF paragraph 155 criterion A as outlined on the slide for you. Looking at B as on the slide, the application is for the erection of 43 dwellings, and the latest 5-year housing land supply position statement confirms we can demonstrate a 4.16 year supply of housing. Therefore, the council cannot demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply, and as there is a quantifiable evidence of an unmet need, this context provides reason to show that the requirements of criterion B of paragraph 155 are met. Criterion C requires that the development be in a sustainable location with particular reference to paragraphs 110 and 115. Paragraph 110 indicates that significant development should be focused on locations that are or can be made sustainable through limiting the need to travel, And this paragraph goes on to say that opportunities to maximise transport solutions will vary between urban and rural areas, and this should be taken into account in decision making. Paragraph 115 seeks to ensure, amongst other things, that sustainable transport modes are prioritised, taking account of the type of development and its location, safe access can be achieved, and any significant impacts on the capacity of the highway network or highway safety can be acceptably mitigated. The application site is located outside of the settlement boundaries of Brandon and Binley Woods. However, it is considered within a reasonable walking and cycling distance of facilities within these settlements and within Woolston to the south, and is considered a sustainable location, and the requirement of criterion C of paragraph 155 is met. In terms of the final criterion in regards to the golden rules that relate to major housing development, which are set out in paragraphs 156 and 157 of the MPPF, this requires affordable housing 15% points above the existing affordable housing requirement, that there's necessary improvements to local or national infrastructure, and there's the provision of new or improvements to existing publicly accessible green spaces, and it's considered that this development would comply with the golden rules. And as outlined in paragraph 158, significant weight should be given to those developments which comply with the golden rules, and this will be assessed in the planning balance. It's therefore considered the principle of the proposed development is acceptable in accordance with the MPPF and policy GP2. As the layout is not being considered at this stage, the exact housing mix proposed has not been established. However, a condition is proposed to ensure that housing mix at the reserved matter stage complies with this policy. As previously stated, the MPPF requires major housing development on sites within the Greenbelt to comply with the golden rules in relation to affordable housing. And paragraph 157 states the affordable housing contribution to satisfy the golden rules is 15 percentage points above the highest existing affordable housing requirement, which would otherwise apply to the development. It's therefore considered that the highest existing affordable housing requirement for this development is 30%, the greenfield requirement in policy H2 of the local plan, and therefore in order to comply with the golden rules, this requirement will increase to 45%. As this is an outline application, the details of the tenure mix of the affordable housing are not known at this stage, but the Section 106 legal agreement would include clauses to secure the 45% of dwellings as affordable units and to allow the tenure to be agreed by the council. This is therefore in accordance with policy H2 of the local plan, and it also accords with the neighbourhood plan policy H3, which requires the provision of affordable housing as part of any redevelopment of brownfield land. In terms of character and design, the overall impacts have been assessed at this outline stage. It's just the comprehensive design will be considered at reserved matters. We do have the illustrative master plan and parameters plan that show the up to 43 dwellings could be accommodated on the site, along with the suitable areas of landscaping and open space. And the application also refers to the properties being a maximum of 2 stories, which reflects nearby residential development, and this is considered acceptable. Landscape assessments have been reviewed and sensitivity studies considered that a development as proposed with boundary vegetation proposed and large areas of landscaping will help to mitigate the landscape impacts of the proposals. There are trees to be removed, but these are generally comprised of trees in poor condition, including those within the boundary hedge to Rugby Road, and those within the area of the former garden centre, which have established since the site became vacant. The council's tree officer has commented on the submitted assessment and raised no objection to the application, subject to tree protection measures being installed. This and a final arboricultural impact assessment could be secured by condition. It's considered the proposed development as shown in the illustrative and master plan, including open space areas to the site boundaries, which will form appropriate linkages to the green and blue infrastructure assets in the area, is in accordance with policy NE2. We have also received, we have also received the submission of details with the application to secure the necessary biodiversity net gain, either on the site or within the adjacent site boundary for this proposal. Moving on to highways. There is a cycle and pedestrian access proposed to Rugby Road from the site, including at the south of the site, which will provide a connection to the public footpaths in the wider area. And these accesses will also allow easy pedestrian accesses to the existing bus stops on Rugby Road. During the course of the application, a range of highway improvements were identified, and these include proposals to extend the existing 30-mile-per-hour speed limit from a distance of around 275 metres eastwards along Rugby Road, to provide a signal-controlled crossing on Rugby Road adjacent to the junction with Gossett Lane, and to modify the lay-by on the southern side of Rugby Road to ensure parked vehicles do not obstruct visibility at the site access, and to upgrade the existing footway along the southern side of Rugby Road towards Binley Woods to provide a 3-metre wide shared pedestrian and cycle path for a distance of around 255 metres. The proposed speed limit change, cycleway and crossing facilities will also increase the accessibility of the wider footpath network within the area, and this will prioritise the sustainable transport methods in accordance with policy D1 of the local plan, and increase the attractiveness of these routes in accordance with the neighbourhood plan policy LF2. Car parking provision will be assessed at the reserve matter stage, but it is considered based on the illustrative master plan that the required level can be achieved. In terms of the other matters that have been considered and outlined in the officer report and included on this slide, these are all considered acceptable, and some are, however, addressed by matters of either conditions or obligations as outlined in the draft decision and the officer report. Turning to planning obligations that would be sought if the committee decides to approve the application, the contributions and triggers are outlined, and although quite small on the slide, this would achieve affordable housing at 45%. There would be open space maintenance. The required biodiversity net gain would be achieved. There would be the highways improvements as outlined, funding for education, libraries, bus stop maintenance, road safety and monitoring for both the Borough and County Council would be achieved. This development would also include still chargeable development, but this is based on the floor space that's created by the dwellings, so the figure would not be established until the reserve matter stage, but just to make the committee aware that this would also be a still chargeable development. As the Council cannot demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply, the tilted balance in paragraph 11D of the framework applies. There are relevant development plan policies in the case of this application, however, the most important for determining the application are out of date. And therefore, planning permission should be granted unless either the first or second limb of paragraph 11D is satisfied. The application of each limb is essentially a matter of planning judgment for the decision taker. There are no footnote 7 considerations for this application. Therefore, the application should be granted unless adverse impacts would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits when assessed against the policies in the framework taken as a whole. The NPPF contains the presumption in favour of sustainable development, and therefore looking at the 3 overarching objectives of sustainability and the benefits of this scheme, we have the government's commitment to significantly boosting the supply of housing, which is considered to achieve significant weight. In terms of the economic benefits of this scheme, we have the construction jobs and spend, the support for local services through household spending, council tax revenue and the new homes benefit. Looking at the social, there would be the provision of accessible open space, footpath and cycle links, the pedestrian crossing and cycleway to Rugby Road, and also additional houses and the affordable housing benefit are given significant weight. In terms of the environmental benefits, the mitigated impacts against habitat, the provision of sustainable urban drainage systems, and the biodiversity net gain being achieved are also provided with a moderate weight, but also complying with the golden rules as outlined in the framework is to be given significant weight. Therefore, it's concluded that the benefits of the proposed development are significant to clearly and demonstrably outweigh the harm that could be caused in relation to material planning considerations. The proposal would be a sustainable form of development, and it's therefore considered the application should be approved without delay in accordance with paragraph 11D II of the framework, and in line with the recommendation as outlined on the screen for the committee. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Simpson Vince, just clipped you in there.
It's more a clarification on something the officer said. It's a big report and there was a lot to go through in there, but just to show I was listening. You actually talked about grey belt being introduced in the MPPF in 2014. I just want to clarify it was 2024, just in case anybody's watching and thinks, oh, that was a while ago, I thought it was new.
Yes, it was 2024. That is a slip of the tongue. Apologies.
Councillor Lawrence.
I think my question is related to the local plan, because I believed, and it is a question for clarification here, that there was evidence coming from that this land, or part of this land, was rated as having a moderate to strong contribution to the green belt, the purposes of green belt. So if that is so, why is it not so with this application? And carrying on with that, is that this land included in the proposed local plan that's going forward now?
Okay, so in relation to the first point in terms of the rating, I think that links back. Let me just go back to yeah, so that was in regards to the evidence base of the emerging local plan. But we had discussed how this was the high-level strategic perspective that looked at the entire area of Greenbelt that's included in included within our borough. Then when we had the application, we've then done a specific assessment in relation specifically to the site and at that level in more detail, that it was therefore considered that it does not strongly contribute to those purposes. So that's the assessment that was made when looking specifically at the site, not the entire area of the Greenbelt in the borough. And yes, the application site is included as a site allocation in the emerging local plan for up to 43 dwellings.
Just come in on that one. One of my concerns, given its location, was how did it fit into the blue-green infrastructure plans? And I think officers have sort of come back on that, that it does seem to meet the requirements of the Prince Thorpe area. Go off. You're not missing out.
Press underneath. And now press top.
Yes, in response to that question, the application site is not specifically covered by either the blue or green infrastructure allocation. It is within the wider biodiversity, but through the proposals that are in terms of the landscaping and retention of the various basins, it is considered that in line with policy NE1 and NE2 that it can contribute sufficiently to that network.
Thank you. Any other technical points? Councillor Edwards.
Thank you. It seems to me that with the climate emergency in the council, 117 trees, I think, in category C instead of being knocked down. That just seemed rather high, but I wondered if you could clarify how that compares to anywhere else, really.
Well, I guess the number of trees that are being removed will be site-specific to each one. In terms of this case, I think a lot of it and the numbers have come from the fact that they have become self-setting. It has all been assessed by the council's tree officer, and they're content that generally the majority of them are in poor condition. Also, biodiversity net gain has to take into consideration any habitat that's being removed, so that'll just be addressed in that manner as well. So it's sort of a two-pronged approach on that.
Are there any further technical points? No, then we'll move into debate.
So this got referred here on the Greenbelt issue, as I understand it. Okay, there are many other issues we may talk about. I have a concern that a dual carriageway is seen as being something that is a dividing line between Binley Woods and Coventry. I think it's the Cot Hat and the Premier Inn are only the A46 distance away from buildings the other side of the road. So I'm not convinced by that argument that somehow the A46, which actually has a very big infrastructure to it in terms of that roundabout, which is elevated, it's bigger than most buildings. But actually the distance between them is as narrow as you could have with a dual carriageway going through. So I don't find that's inconsistent with other things we've seen around other parts of the Anstey area and things like that. It's inconsistent when the M6 was the distance between Greenbelt and not Greenbelt. So I don't find that consistent. So therefore, if I would consider Binley Woods and Coventry as being a continuous urban environment, then this is encroaching into what is strictly Greenbelt, is stopping urban sprawl towards Brandon. And that's where I push back at, because at some point we've got to say you just can't call everything Greenbelt because there is no Greenbelt left. Okay, it just becomes impossible to have any Greenbelt protection. The whole Greenbelt in the West Midlands is protecting two things. You can show a map of all the green around these areas and the little holes within them. And the little holes in them is one called Birmingham and the other one's called Coventry. It's a lovely map if you ever show it. So it is about stopping the sprawl of these two main things, Birmingham and Coventry. And this is essentially allowing the sprawl of Coventry. Now, I raise this because this is the reason it's been brought here. Is this thing. I'm not saying where I'm going to vote for it or against it at this moment, but I thought I just need to bring that into the debate because I think that's what we're discussing here, is whether this is Greenbelt or not. And I don't accept the argument that was presented that the A46 stops it being a continuous urban environment.
There's quite a few comments in there from highways. Do you want to vote speed reduction?
Oh, do you want to come back on first? Yeah, I'll come back on part of that and then Lucy will finish it off. Through you, Chair. Obviously, yes, there was reference to the A46, but there's also reference to an area of woodland as well between there and I think what is actually, there's a Jehovah's Witness building there as well. So there's been... So I've got Google on. There's a small area of woodland between the A46 and then the start on the southern side of Rugby Road. You then have I think it's also mentioned in the report, there's the rugby pitch at Broad Street on the other side. And then, okay, it is only a small area of woodland, I will grant you that. And then obviously you've then got Binley Wood School, and then obviously between this site and Brandon, there are other fields as well, and paddocks to the south as you continue down there. There has been case law now on this about villages, and obviously Binley Woods is defined as a village in our local plan. I don't think the residents of, or the Binley Woods area, I think, is regarded as being separate from Coventry. And unfortunately, whether we like it or not, the case law has decided that, when talking at the purposes of the green belt, it talks about urban sprawl and towns, not villages. So whilst this may be perceived to be a continuation of the urban area of Coventry, we believe when assessing it against the policies and the guidance, the decisions that have come out from the courts and the appeal decisions from the inspectorate, that we would regard this as not a continuation of Coventry because of those additional areas I've just mentioned, and therefore would be regarded as grey belt and not having that strong contribution toward the urban sprawl of Coventry. It is a planning judgment, it is a decision made by the decision maker, but that's our expert view on this particular site.
Also, just a point that obviously you'd made regarding it being called in on the basis of Greenbelt. That was the case of where we were in the position at the time of when it was called in. The introduction of Greybelt via the MPPF hadn't taken place yet, so we didn't have this consideration whenever that call-in took place on that specific matter. So the consideration of the application in regards to Greybelt happened afterwards.
Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Chair. You acknowledged me. I thought you were going to come back to me. If you're driving from Coventry through Binley Woods, I don't think you notice a discernible break now between Coventry and Binley Woods. Yes, there's the pitch on the north and what was, wasn't a garden centre, but it was a, sorry?
Coffee shop.
Yeah,
Coffee shop.
yeah. So you don't necessarily drive, you could easily think you're still part of Coventry as you drive through there. And I think the danger is this just adds to that perception that you're kind of becoming part. Yes, I can know technically it isn't, but the perception is as you're driving that it is still part of Coventry. And it's interesting that this gets classified as grey belt. According to your slides, we've got a total of 247 trees on the site and 131 are going to be taken away in total. And it's not a big site. And it's like, well, if you're taking away over 50% of the trees and that doesn't classify as green belt and it's grey belt, how are we defining this? Because to all intents and purposes, most people would look at those pictures and look at the site and go, yeah, I can see that's green belt. And you're going to take away over half the trees. Okay, granted, some of them aren't going to be in great condition, but it's still taking away over half the trees. And yet, this isn't a green belt, grey belt site, and it's fine to just kind of continue with the development. I just find it, we don't have any sort of very good definitions of grey belt, and I just think this is sort of an easy one to just drop in and go, well, there was a nursery there, so therefore it's grey belt, but actually the nursery itself and the garden centre that was there was presumably in between all of those trees, and now they've all got to come down. It just seems a bit of a shame.
Yeah, through you, Chair, in looking at the 5 purposes of the green belt, and in terms of grey belt, it only looks at 3, the loss of trees isn't a reason. It's to do with checking unrestricted sprawl, which obviously we spoke about just a moment ago. It's about preventing neighbouring towns from merging into one another, and it's also preserving the setting and special character of historic towns. So there isn't a test in terms of, and there's quite a lot of woodland area in our borough, I will accept that, and particularly on this sort of edge of the eastern edge of Coventry. This site in itself is within this principal biodiversity area, but unfortunately that isn't a reason why a site may not be defined as grey belt.
condition in here suggested by the arboreal officer that some of these trees will be replaced anyway. It's actually in the report. So it's not as though they're just taking them away, and they'll always be taken away. There is some planting proposed within the application. Councillor Richard Harrington.
Oh, thank you. I can understand the arguments from here, but we've got boundaries. I mean, when we had this plan application in last planning meeting regarding Low Hill Morton Road, it was near the boundary, but you have to have some sort of boundary for where it is. I mean, there's no properties built until behind Morrison's. So if you look at that, the Coventry Eastern Bypass, you've got literally Cox Hut, you've got used to be TGI Fridays Hotel, you've got Morrison's, you've got an industrial estate and things like that. And there's that boundary, and yes, they are very close to Coventry, but then there's other parts of Warwickshire or Rugby are close to Leicestershire, there's close to Northamptonshire. So we can't have, I don't agree with that argument personally, because we are so close to different areas. It's just where the cookie crumbles. Unfortunately, we have boundaries for a reason. I'm very encouraged regarding the possible, obviously, extra social houses. Walking around Binley Woods, when I stood there years ago when I first got into this, for villages like Binley Woods, it's very hard for kids or be around their parents or be around their friends, things like that, for affordable homes. And unfortunately, there's not enough there. So for me, that makes all the difference, because if people want to stay in Binley Woods, we need to put affordable houses there. And also as well, we need to be careful what we do, because I know it's not in planning consideration, but we rejected a plan application on the car wash site, and it went overturned, and we got charged a lot of money for it. So you need to be careful what we wish for. Now, I appreciate there's concerns about the site, which I totally agree. I'm a bit concerned, and hopefully what the council's not here to explain that information, so that's been explained tonight. But I think personally we need to look at it as a list the best way we can. We haven't got a 5-year plan. We've got to protect ourselves from there, and also this is going to be producing affordable houses in Binley Woods. And tell me where else we're going to put it.
Yeah, just if I could make an additional point on that in you raising in regards to the affordable housing. Obviously, because the site, in assessing it as a grey belt site, based on the requirements of the government at the moment, as explained, we are requiring the provision of 45% of affordable homes on this site. Currently, there is also the requirement, in order to secure these homes, there is the position of the government that you cannot submit for viability to remove that requirement for affordable housing. It has to remain in order to comply with the golden rules. The argument of viability cannot currently be put forward, so this is the time sort of to secure that, if agreed by the committee.
Yeah, I think the point on affordability is well raised. Certainly, when I was in social housing and I had to provide affordable homes, and the first 100% were nominated to the council, they gave me the top of the waiting list. Unfortunately, most of the people on the top of the waiting list were from Brandon, Binley, most of the villages, and they just put their name on the list as an insurance policy in case they couldn't get any housing in their own village or near to their village. At least this application will ensure that local people will get a chance of getting a home. I think that's a positive. Whether it's 100% rent, whether it's shared ownership, whether it's any multitude of different tenures that you can have within affordability, at least local people will get the chance, if they're registered on the waiting list, of a home in the future. Councillor Freeman, do you want to come in?
Well, I tend to agree with you on the point about affordable homes. And from what I can see, the master plan, what we will end up with is a considerable improvement on what's there. The point about the removal of trees, I think the officer stated that an awful lot of them were they were self-seeding, which suggests we're not dealing with the removal of 117 mature trees, which I think would raise eyebrows. But I think on balance, I'm inclined to propose acceptance of this report. And
Do you want to make your proposal?
yes, yeah.
Do you have a secretary? Right. So, proposer and a seconder for the application. Can we move the vote? Those in favour? These ones. Do we have any advance notices of site visit?
No, we don't, Chair.
We don't. Okay. Appeals update. This is a good news story, folks.
Okay, yes, through you, Chair, thank you. Members will see we have an appeals update. In the first appendix, there are 6 appeals that we've had the results back on. These have all been dismissed. They were all delegated items as well. As members may be aware that the majority of planning decisions are taken by officers at a delegated level through the Chief Officer for Growth and Investment. And I suppose it gives you also then new reassurance as councillors that officers are also, generally making the right decision there, because then when we are challenged independently by the inspector, on all these cases they have been dismissed. So, it's also sort of reassuring for us as officers that we are interpreting things correctly. The other one that's in there then is the enforcement appeal result from Fernfields at Brighton. That was actually a split decision in the end by the inspectorate. The appeal was actually allowed to allow gypsy and travellers there, but it did fail on the earth bunds and the gates and walls, and they've got a compliance period of 12 months for that, and then that may be also subject to then separate enforcement action if they don't comply. In terms of other appeals that we've had back, Oakdean at Bretford, that was another appeal that was dismissed on highway safety grounds. There was also an accompanying enforcement appeal on that. That was also dismissed. And we've also had a dismissal on the Peter Hall application, which was in Appendix B, again an enforcement-related one, as that was also dismissed, and they've got a 28-day compliance on that. The other case I want to bring to members' attention, which isn't in the document submitted, is that we have had an appeal lodged against non-determination. We don't get too many of these because we generally try and work with developers, try and overcome concerns, but obviously in some cases where that isn't happened, we then may report certainly the major applications then to committee. This was an application that was due to come to committee. It was land southeast of Rugby Road, Clifton on Dunsmore. It was an outline application for up to 160 dwellings. Unfortunately, the ability for us to determine this application has now been taken out of our hands. They have gone to the planning inspectorate and they've appealed against non-determination. We were still awaiting technical consultees, so the application wasn't ready to come to committee. But the inspectorate do fast-track these types of appeals, so we haven't been in a position to present this application to committee for their consideration. We have to write our statement of case by the end of next week, and then the inquiry is due to be held on the 28th of April for 6 days. Up to 6 days it will sit. So we are currently preparing our statement of case and writing it to outline a council's case against this appeal, and then we're in the process of taking further advice on that. So it was just basically to bring that to members' attention, and that's where we are with that particular case. I've got nothing further to add unless anyone's got any questions.
Thank you. And we go on to delegated decisions, 13th of November. Because was that a chorus? We noted. Thank you all. And that concludes the business of this meeting this evening. Thank you for your kind attention.